I found myself in situations where, oh my God, how can I be in this situation and be this person that I project out there? The addict wants to survive. It's got a life of its own, and it's you, but it's not you. It gives you an impression it's you, but it's not.
You're describing like it's a beast within you.
She was blown away, a lot of pain in her eyes. I remember that. It was very, very sad for me to see that in her, and that I didn't even know that was sadness. I was just like devastated.
Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with former 2-times world surfing champion Tom Carroll. If you missed part 1, you would have got a sense of the challenging, crazy life Tom was living on the world surfing circuit. But how, despite ticking all the boxes of a successful life, he was slowly being dragged into a world of illicit drugs. So we're going to talk about that, Tom, because as I've kept saying in part 1, I want people to understand, how drugs can just drag people in. Now, if they can drag someone like yourself in, everyone's susceptible to it.
Yeah.
Before we do, I want to raise something that I know was a pivotal moment in your life, and it's a heavy situation. We touched on it very briefly, but you lost your sister Jo in 87 through a car accident.
Yeah, that was in real shock to the system. Whereas losing my mother was sort of like a real kind of like a fading kind of situation, and kind of unrecognizable in so many ways. But whereas Josephine passing was like a shock to the system, boom, right in there, boom. Delivered to me whilst I was in Hawaii, just prior to my first Pipeline Masters win, actually, and who I dedicated that to my sister. And the experience of like losing my sister, who was really dear to me, to a car accident, it just, it didn't make much sense. It's and my first response was just angry. I just couldn't believe how angry I was. I wasn't crying or anything. Not that I have great information in me to cry. I was like, it was a very, very tough moment. And I remember calling my father straight away saying, because my brother let me know. And then I talked to my father on the phone. I said, I'm coming home. And he said, no, I know that Jo would like you to stay and win the event, So it was the day. It had been raining for literally like a month nonstop on the North Shore. So the water was all brown, the ocean was all brown, the sky had been, bucketing down. And then the next day when I woke up, and the swell hadn't been so good. The surf the forecast wasn't great for the event. I woke up the next morning, it was blue sky.
Yeah.
The swell, it was clean, clear, beautiful surface, and this beautiful, amazing new west swell was arriving, that's the sort of swell you need for pipeline. Now, I had just started to wear a helmet, so I didn't get head injury at pipeline. That's another story, but no one ever used to wear a helmet at pipeline. But people used to hit their head, and people die from hitting their head there. So I thought, and plus they get other head injury. I thought, I want to push it. I want to really go for it. And I've been looking at trying to wear a helmet for the previous few years, but I couldn't get the right gear. But this time I had a helmet. I remember paddling out there, and I had this other sense of purpose. It wasn't like I was just Tom anymore. It was more than me just paddling out there. I was carrying this sort of, I'm doing this for my sister. I was still in a lot of shock within my system. And so I was sort of like taken away from the trivialities of a competition and then put straight into my connection with pipeline, which I developed over a number of years. And I felt that there was imminent that I was moving towards a Pipeline Masters title, which I really wanted. but I knew at some point I was going to get this. I didn't know it was going to be this day, but and it was the last day of competition. Already done the preliminaries day, so I was in the last day of competition. There was about 4 heats to surf throughout the day to the final, or 3 to the final and the final. And I literally surfed in, I was 8 to 10 foot, beautiful, clean pipeline, very, very hard on the reef when we first paddled out in the morning and for the warm-up session. And immediately I felt more confident with the helmet on. And I'd been practicing with the helmet. I felt more confident to go deeper and harder. And there was something else carrying me. I wasn't really caught up in a whole bunch of stuff that I normally get caught up in mentally. So I was just given completely to my performance.
And when you say go deeper and harder, at a place like Pipeline, again, for people that don't follow surfing, you're surfing on a coral reef. Like, you make a mistake there and you can die, and people do die there. So when you want to go harder and deeper, that's you're in a zone that you had a different energy about you that bore out from the news that you were dealing of the tragedy of your sister Jo passing away.
Yeah, and I seem to have a better idea of the lineup. It sort of expanded. Something happened with me that I could actually my timing of the way the wave was coming was increased. My awareness of how the waves were lined up beyond what I was looking at in front of me. I could sense. As a surfer, you get to understand the rhythm of the ocean, and when you've been surfing a long time, you get to understand that you can sense, and you can pretty much get clear about how the set patterns are moving in the chaos of the ocean. There is a pattern in the set order, and it sort of starts to line up this way. And the new West Sweller pipeline I was familiar with, I understood it, but in this circumstance, I didn't have anything in the way anymore. I didn't have the drama of all the other stuff, little bits and pieces of trivialities.
The trivia
they all just dropped away, and then I could sort of really just give everything I could to the wave and the situation, and use it, and having the helmet that I didn't have to worry, okay, well, let me headbutt the reef in a way. That was kind of a way I was thinking. I couldn't say I was thinking that consciously, but I was just in my head. I could just take off a little bit deeper. I could get closer to the reef. I could get a little bit more critical with my surfing. And I just keep moving through and got up to the podium, won the event, and gave it to my sister. And I kind of, it was an amazing day, but I didn't deal with things too well.
How was it emotionally for you on that day?
Well, I didn't really, I didn't know how to deal with it. So at the time, I didn't understand the deeper ramifications within myself, and of losing my sister, and it seemed to be more, it seemed like a lot of people around me were kind of making a big deal about it, and I was sort of going, "What's going on here?" It was my sister. I felt very strange, and I felt very. Like I didn't know how to work with that at the time, and it was very tricky.
Quite often a male thing too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like dealing with grief, and it manifests itself in other ways.
Yeah, and hence, it did. I remember that night I had a big party, and that night I kind of partied myself into oblivion, and I think that's kind of how it kind of started playing out in many ways. I think the trauma of that still played out. It didn't just sort of, it wasn't dealt with.
You push it.
Yeah, I'll be right.
And look,
I'll be right.
Look, this is how tough I am.
And you got to, and you feel like you at that time, and that my level of maturity was just, I've still got to be this thing out here, and I got to just hold it up, and I didn't have that kind of, feel it and let it be felt properly.
That's interesting. You say that, because I think a lot of people carry it, and in different levels. But you're the macho world surfing champion. That's fearlessly conquering pipeline, you're not going to show that you're a broken human being on the inside. No. You're just going to project, look, I can handle this, and you deal with your own demons in your own way, which is not necessarily a good thing, is it?
No, and they will come out. Like, it's no doubt about it. They're just going. It's just like that whack-a-mole kind of like when you get trying to knock this thing, keeps coming up. You're trying to hit that one and it pops up in that hole. It's just that nature, it needs to be dealt with, and it'll just keep coming up until it's straight. You go straight into it.
I think that's a good way to describe what was happening to you with the drugs too. So tell us the journey of the drugs. You started smoking some grass when you were a young fella, and then cocaine became the drug of choice. When did you realise that you might have had a problem? Like, sorry, I'll just pull that one back. Also, as a world champion, you're playing high price here. Like, if you're exposed as you're doing this, doing that, it's a big fall from grace.
Big fall from grace, and it is a big fall from grace. And
did you consider that?
Definitely. Over the time that I found myself in situations where, oh my God, how can I be in this situation and be this person that I project out there? And being this person here.
You're high profile. You're dealing with drug dealers. There's a risk associated with that. How did you get the connections to the drug dealers, and were you wary of them selling you out, like going to the newspaper or,
Well, the addict is very, very cunning, and it's very creative. So to survive, we'll do anything to create a scenario that is going to keep the other side going,
right?
Because that's supporting it. So I actually kept one person as my dealers, and I very rarely move outside that.
Right.
So that was turning into be quite, it was quite a, it's a strange relationship because you're both addicted. So it's not really any humanness involved.
No.
So it's tricky, and that there's particularly crystal meth is one of those substances where people have got a lot of stigma around it, even though it's forms that are used in pharmaceuticals and forms of, that style of drug is used in all kinds of different ways and forms, and for many years now. So, and all the way to fighter pilots and so on. So but you're in this world where it's very underhanded, and I needed to keep it secretive. So that adds to that kind of.
But that was that rat cunning that comes from hiding this addiction, this demon inside you.
Yeah, it was very complex. Creates a lot of complexity.
Because I just the risk that you would have felt each time, it's just
it was like I was crossing a line every time, and as I'd have to every now and then break out and score somewhere else, that was even riskier. So that would even be more kind of feeling like I was right on the edge, and if I pulled it off, it'd be like it'd set a precedence in sort of dipping further into it.
Yeah, I can imagine the pressure you'd feel under it, because if someone came across that or whatever, and the headlines that you in handcuffs being walked away wouldn't have been good. Yeah. Did it hit you like an imposter syndrome feeling? Like if you're being presented, look at this professional sportsman, the shiny new example of professional sports surfing, and then you're doing a line of coke. Yeah,
well, that's it, and it was and around me at the time, quite often it was I wouldn't say encouraged, but it was seen to be okay. So I'd sort of buy into that, and that's where we become blind. We start sort of blinding ourselves out, and we stop listening to that flicker of conscience in us. That's sort of the real sort of message coming from within, going, "Hey, Tom, maybe you shouldn't be doing this," and you just sort of, "Well, I'll be right. I can pull that off, and I can." And all of a sudden, that becomes very, very faint. very, very faint, and we kind of go the other way.
Because you've been validated by the people around you going, yeah, this is cool, this is what we do.
And then we surround ourselves with those sort of people too.
And push away the others that don't necessarily agree.
Yeah, and that doesn't make sense to anyone. But it
is human nature, isn't it? You gravitate towards the people who accept your behaviour.
Yeah, and support it and allow it to happen. And it's tricky for people who love you and do that, because they kind of get caught in the disease of it too. So
how many lives you're impacting on, not just your own.
And it's quite often because it's such it creates unconscious behaviour and it sort of literally sends us to sleep inside ourselves. Addiction itself is a kind of a very tricky one, because it's a disease that'll tell us that we're okay when we're completely stuffed, or when we're completely stuffed, or can tell us that we're stuffed when we're okay. So it does it both ways.
Right.
So it's tricky. It's a little bit of a hide and seek sort of situation where the addiction just comes in the background without us really wanting to see it anyway. So when we get used to turning away from something, the thing just grows in the dark, in the darkness of that. So that's the tricky one.
It's an interesting way to describe it, but it's that insipid way that just infiltrates your life, and you haven't really realised it.
And the next minute you're doing these things, how did this happen? Yeah. Like, am I really going to this length to get to this, to do this? And you get shocked and you go, how do I can't tell anyone this about this because this is kind of a little bit private. And then all of a sudden you're locking things away. And when you're locking things away, that's really tricky. That's the dangerous period where when you're locked inside with it and you're kind of pushing,
not being truthful
communication,
to yourself.
Not being truthful to hit to this, and then living out a whole nother person out there. That's, so you've got masks between you and the world, and those masks, to keep them held up, it takes a lot of effort.
Oh, I can imagine. There's I think it's not only a funny story, sad story, beautiful story, and shows a lot of love. The story with your brother Nick, when he was hearing things that you're hitting it too hard. And I think Nick, the sense I get, he would be open-minded, but he's always got your back. And he was under the belief that you were hitting the drugs too hard, and he was worried about you, as a brother would be. And so he decided to take it upon himself to find your dealer and phone the dealer and make certain threats to the dealer. Do you want to talk us through that?
Well, that was in the US, and there was a place where he was when he was living there. And this was a phase where I was doing a lot of cocaine and at times, and when I could. I wasn't doing it all the time, but when I could, I was one of those extreme kind of people where I either go real hard or you're just out. You're not doing anything. So that's how I'd sort of operate in that area. And I was being supplied by this person, and my brother was actually... I was in the person's office and he called up.
Your brother called the office?
Called the office, and I answered the phone, and he didn't care to know who was on the phone, but he actually gave me the message straight up, and I went, "Oh!" And that was him telling that person.
Nick, your brother, thought he was talking to your dealer.
Yeah, and I got the message, and I put the phone down, and that was a real big postcard from the edge, I call it. It's like the postcard from the edge of experience that kind of gives you that strong, here it is, Tom, this is the reality. You're hurting people. You're really hurting people.
It's a hit you over the head type message, isn't it?
And when that, especially, your brother and you don't, the thing about addiction is that it's a relationship with something that you've swapped out for human relationship. And it's where you've not trusted human relationship. So you've gone for another relationship with a substance that sort of gotten you out of your body, a sensation of not being in here where it doesn't feel good. We want to feel better. So we go for, and that drug that of choice, which was definitely something that got me above the line. It wasn't something that, because I always felt like I was a little bit below the line, maybe a little bit depressed and not really realizing it and understanding it. You thought it was
just taking you up to...
And I needed to, and I didn't like drinking so much because that would have taken me, And I didn't really like smoking pot too much, even though it was sometimes a bit sort of nice. It was always a little bit down. So I didn't like being down. I wanted to be above the line and lift above the line. So as soon as I touched something like that, it was like, oh, I like that.
Right.
I'm more engaged now. And so
you liked yourself more.
Yeah, and I was more outgoing or more, I was not someone who wanted to sort of sit back. And I didn't see myself like that. But, and that was an illusory sort of sense anyway. But later down the track, I found that out. But it's like, and that it just, for some reason within me, it wasn't okay to be a bit below the line.
So that that's call that you got from Nick, that would have had to jolt you. And I want you, can you pass on the Nick, like having been a cop for as long as I have, I've heard some good threats. I think he did a really good threat the way he played out. So what it was Nick speaking to the person he believed to be Tom's dealer, saying, "What hand do you write with?" And the bloke answered, right hand. Well, I'm going to fucking break your right hand. And that's a good threat. I've heard a lot of different types of threats. I think that was a cold clinical threat.
Straight up.
But it obviously didn't work on you.
No, see, that's the cunning nature of the addict within us, which will sort of work its way to develop itself and grow within itself. Try to take you on that illusory path, and that is possibly and actually as it grows, it actually gets some power over you, gets a lot of power, takes all the power, and so any sort of power that you feel like you have just diminishes as a person. So it feels very like you don't have any more power anymore, and this thing's taking us for a ride. So
at what point, you know that now, but when you're involved in it, did you realise that? When did you realise that? Like, you talk about it now and you explain it very well, but I would imagine when you're living that life, you're not seeing it. Well, you think someone else is a junkie. I'm not a junkie. Yeah.
And actually, that's what a junkie looks like, and I don't look like that yet. Yeah. Right? Yet. You just don't even have yet in your mind. But that's what that person,
I would never go that far.
Yeah, I would never go that far, but, give me more of that. Because, like I said, the relationship with a substance becomes stronger than the relationships with people. And particularly people that love you and so on. So those connections, you disconnect and you go towards the relationship with the substance, and the relationship with the substance becomes very, very strong. And so it's all about relationship.
And that's your relationship is with the substance that's luring you.
It doesn't matter. I got these 3 beautiful daughters. I got this beautiful wife. I got this beautiful life. My relationship with that was it's meaningful. It's not saying my humanity hadn't gone, because it's not over until the fat lady sings.
Yeah,
and I know that's for sure. And because I've seen people resurrected from literally right on the line. I'd seen that happen. People come back, and it's a beautiful thing to see. But until we've had that full corrective experience with it, where we're on our knees and we can see that this is a dead end, and we're really sort of in the fetal position, and you're really like crying, "Mummy, like I got nothing." And you actually say the word God, which was never in my vocabulary. Like, God, help me, I'll do anything.
Crying out for something.
Something.
Yeah.
Help me here. I'm completely fucked, if I can say that. I'm done. I couldn't. In fact, it'll take it'll just strip us of everything. So I was on that point in 2006, but the first time I sought help, well, I was actually asked to seek help, and people around me, all the love around me was sort of going, it was in 1991. So it was a long stint.
Time ago.
It was a long stint, and that's how Carrie plays out.
And you probably, because you are who you are, would have been covering it up better. People would turn a blind eye, give you a little bit of room. You might have been a dickhead that or gone too far, but they'll give you a little bit of latitude, and that probably feeds into it as well. When did you so cocaine was the drug of choice, but then crystal meth. How did you find your way there?
Well, just like anything like this, where addiction and my addict become very, very strong by then, and I needed to cope in the world, and I didn't like the feeling of being on cocaine anymore. I didn't like the feeling of all these things that I was going towards. And I knew there was a destructive element, very destructive, and I wanted to address it somehow. And I'd always been trying to address it, but always one-on-one. And I'd always sort of manipulate the situation one-on-one. It was never.
What do you mean by that?
Well, say get therapy. I can sort of manipulate the therapy, not being truthful.
Half-hearted.
With a mask on, with a mask on, saying this, and then the other. If I just reveal myself fully, then things start to move, and that's what I found out later down the track. But during those times that I just sort of keep people at bay who love me, and the addict would still remain. The addict wants to survive. It's got a life of its own, and it's not. It's you, but it's not you. It gives you an impression it's you, but it's not.
You're describing like it's a beast within you, but it's probably a good way of describing it.
Well, you think about how we are as a human. We get all these different experiences out of ourselves. We're multidimensional. So it's powerful. So, and like you said earlier, like everyone has what the Buddha said is attachment, and attachment causes suffering. So, and that's our human experience. And this is just a refined form of, well, not a refined form, but just a blown up version of attachment. And this is where attachment takes us. And I was attached to something that, was non-human. So, and you can do it with anything. Addiction can form itself around anything. So, and I don't want to say that lightly, because addiction gets thrown around. Oh, you're addicted to this. You're addicted to that. This gets thrown around, bandied about as if it's like, but it's a deadly disease for people, and it takes us out. So I was around about 2006. Crystal meth had come into my life 5 years before that. I had a beautiful third daughter. I wasn't ready for her. I just didn't feel like I could cope at that time. And then someone introduced me after a period where I, when I'd stop using anything, I'd sort of white knuckle it, what they call white knuckling, because you're just sort of like thinking about stuff a couple of times a day, just going, oh, maybe I could do that, or is that one, they just pop into your mind. You didn't have any tools to deal with this sort of stuff, where you just be at prey to your own thoughts and whatever's going on. And then next minute you're back to using again, or you're back to going.
Did you confide in anyone close to it? Did you?
No, I just didn't know how to start that language.
Was it because you were embarrassed or ashamed?
Shame is a huge one. Shame just shuts us down. Shame is so toxic on the system. Shame, guilt, it's just shame. It is brutal. It brutalizes us. And so, and shame, and until it's sort of unraveled, it creates this sort of knot, it creates a tangled web of knots, and like a big ball of string or stuff, and you can't get the knot undone. It feels like that, and it kind of weighs us down. It has an energetic kind of force on this human system that holds us down, it just down, shame, oh, shame, you can't, so it's brutal. It is brutal. It's a killer. And so this stops us from being verbal, being able to share how we are, and this to reveal ourselves as being a human. I thought I was superhuman. I'm just a human being. Like, and this is what happened. So next minute I'm sort of trying this drug, which I'd been off for a couple of months, and I was feeling clear and clean, and I'd been working out. I was feeling much better, and I really wanted to step up. Beautiful daughter coming, and I want to be there for all my girls. That's my natural urge.
You had three girls at this stage, and your wife.
And my wife, and I had a great life. I had everything to live for, but this thing was grabbing me, and I got introduced to. I'd actually tried it before, and it didn't even come anywhere near. Kind of like touching that thing that, if you got the right circumstances. And then you just throw the right thing at the right time.
Got you.
And then it sort of locks in like the piece of the jigsaw puzzle that you've been looking for to keep you and get you engaged and lift to the situation.
It has to be powerful. Like you've got your family that you love. You got your life that you love. You like keeping yourself, your whole career's been based on your physicality. Like you're super fit, super strong, everything going, and you got this one thing that could destroy the lot of them. And you're still, you're attracted to it like a moth to a bright light.
Yeah, and it was actually moth to a good black hole. It's like it was amazing. It's baffling. Like I don't know how anyone on the outside looking in could understand any of that stuff. I don't wish it upon anyone either that they have to try to understand what's going on, because it doesn't make any sense to the person who has never experienced it.
Well, I think the way you're describing it, that you're just driven to it, you're drawn to it, and that is a good way of getting the message across, because I don't think people fully understand that once it's got hold of you.
And at some level, the same thing that enabled me to focus very, very, pin sharp focus, driven, all these aspects of my character were called upon to drive the addict. And in a blind sense. So
all your strengths become your weaknesses chasing the drug.
Absolutely, yeah. It's amazing. And you don't know where that happens. Like the addict works for you and then it works against us. I say the addict aspects of our humanness and our character starts to sort of tip over and work against us. And you never really see that point or understand that when you're in it.
And you're deluding yourself. So as I understand it, well, from what I picked up, the bullshit was called on you when you were away, and your wife found your ice pipe and all your little equipment. Tell us through that. What happened?
Wow. I was away for a month and I got back and I'd sort of lined up, because I knew it wouldn't use when I was away, of course, and then I lined up something from overseas. And so when I got home, and I was just a little bit into it, and the first day back, and I was getting high, and I was pretty fired up because I hadn't had anything for a month. So all my energy comes back. All my stores of, like good serotonin were back, and I was very physical on my trips, my journey, and for a month. And I came back to the family, and I was back at home, and I was in my zone. And then she waited like a day. She was flabbergasted when she found it, because there was no sign of it. I'd covered it so well for a few years, and so she was blown away, a lot of pain in her eyes. I remember that. It was very, very sad for me to see that in her, and that I didn't even know that was sadness. I was just like devastated by the whole experience of being revealed. Another level of shame comes over us, doubles down on us. Like it's and then it's such a shock that you really want to do something. I don't know what I was going to do, but to do something about it. So that moment, even though it looked like a whole lump of shit, was just the worst thing ever, it was the best. At the same time, the gold was in it, and then that was the time when things started to shift.
Can you identify your worst time? What was the lowest that you hit with your drug addiction?
Oh, there was many kind of bottoms, they talk about rock bottom.
Yeah.
I would say emotionally, it's the big rock bottom emotionally when I just couldn't stop. And I was doing recovery meetings in between and trying to survive, the addicts trying to survive. And there's the other side of me not wanting to do it. So I remember my sponsor in the NA program, Narcotics Anonymous program, said, look, Tom, I've been revealed again, that I've been sneakily going off and doing it like this sneaky underhanded addict. There's often way creating his another little pathway to use. And I had 1 foot in recovery and 1 foot out. And my sponsor at the time, late Muzz, really beautiful human, said, Tom, you've got 1 foot in and got 1 foot out. When you got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you're splitting yourself in two. This is disastrous effects will happen here, Tom. Yeah. You're heading for real disaster. And that's when he suggested that, Tom, I advise you to go and do some treatment time, some rehab time, so you can get some time. And that's when I was really, really down and low. I remember I was literally reaching out to something I didn't understand, didn't know, to, in my quiet time, just asking for help. And it came. Yeah. I'm not saying anything's woo-woo here, but when your real deep intention is to move beyond it, then you kind of, some little opening starts to happen, and then the good stuff starts to come in. That's the low point,
and you're crawling your way out.
Yeah, and it's the best thing is to be at that point. Yeah. Otherwise, you won't be open.
Yeah.
And you definitely cannot. You can't graft a new idea onto a closed mind, and that's what addiction is. It's just a closed shop.
Good way of describing it.
So I still hadn't surrendered to full recovery yet. There's some months down the track, and that was in August 2006. It wasn't until December 18 where I fully surrendered and went in to do some treatment, and I spent 6 weeks in a rehab, which was the best thing that ever happened to me.
It worked for you?
Well, you say work for me. It's funny when you say that. Sort of like, it definitely, it's got me to that point of, okay, well, I can surrender to 1 day of recovery. Got me to that point. It gave me a whole bunch of information. It was like a fire hose of information and quite powerful work that I was ready to take on. For some reason, I didn't know I was ready, but I was ready to take on. Yeah. And I needed to take a break from my normal life. I needed to be away from the substances or the ability to find them. I just needed to be in that zone and feel held. And that's how this place played out. And I'm still clean today. That definitely worked at that point. And there was a lot more work to be done.
Did they call you on your bullshit, or did you play off I'm Tom Carroll? Did you?
The groups that we were working in, they would call me out, and that's the good thing. You're in with groups of people that are trying to get to somewhere with their life, and they're willing to open up to who they really are and to reveal themselves. And that's, if you've got these well-formed masks between you and the world that create the illusion of someone else, and then you got these two people going on, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know how many people you can have going at once. You can have a lot by the the sign of history, and you see how people have been and still are today, that we can project a whole nother human being through this mask. And so they were well placed. Like, it took a while for them to break down.
It would be harder to hide in an environment like that, because they would have seen it.
It's the best place to be for those who I didn't even know I wanted to be clean, and I didn't know whether I was going to be able to stop, because I was doing recovery meetings, 12-step recovery meetings for a few months with the guidance, with help there, and I still had the masks on. So as soon as you've got the masks on, truth the honesty can't start to move through you.
Why you still got that mask?
Honesty is the addict cannot live in the light of honesty. It cannot. Our addict, no matter what it is, as soon as you get honest about how you are or how a situation is for you within to another human being and or beings that has your interest at heart.
Yeah.
And even if they don't, even if you just, here I am, this is me, I'm out here, I'm laid out on the table, this is how it is, something starts to happen. The addict retreats. It can't survive. The light's too strong. So it has to retreat back into the darkness, wherever that goes. Don't know. But it's a part of our character that sort of slips away and it cannot form itself in the light of that honesty.
You're describing it very well. Like it's, I'm seeing here gobsmacked, but I'm watching you talk about it, and it's that internal battle from within. You're in a war within,
and it feels like that whilst you're in that battle. I mean, it can be very torturous. That's what we use, but it doesn't need to be. In fact, once we surrender completely, there's a kind of a left, because there's a lot of head noise being an addict. There's a lot of head noise through that battle. A very, very loud head comes on, and it's very, very quite torturous. And so we have to try and put it out with something. And it's usually something from, some form of alcohol or something to put this thing out. And so hence, depression's very, very controlling, battling with the mind, battling against it, battling and forcing and fighting. So this fight becomes very tiresome, and until there's a surrender, and the white flag goes up, and there's just honesty coming out of you. Whatever word that comes out is honesty, is honestly who you are at the very core of who you are. Then something miraculous starts to happen. When the surrender happens, there's usually a very quiet space. There's a space of no words. So in complete surrender, there's no words. You're completely open to any suggestion that may come your way and you're open to change, which needs to happen. You can't change when you're in battle. You're just fighting and you're just holding this one position, and it becomes tiresome. And you're actually, it's
then you got to let it go.
Yeah,
but it's like it's an ongoing battle. There was 6 months after you got out of rehab, a chance, and this is a sliding door moment in your life, and it could have gone very bad, and we probably wouldn't be sitting here today. But you saw your dealer on a roundabout, and you've stopped, and you've instantly, after 6 months clean. You've looked at him, and it brought back all those thoughts, and you got his number to score that afternoon.
Yeah, and it's like that. I literally...
when I heard about that, Tom, I thought, what the fuck? Like, you've done all that work, and you just see this bloke passing in a roundabout, and you're going to throw it all away.
Well, time doesn't matter with this disease.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Like, I've got a lot of experience of living life and going through life's ups and downs without having to put a drug into me for the last 16 and some months time, right? Since, December 18, 2006. So that's quite a bit of time, but I know that I'm only one bad decision away from, and it doesn't mean I'm like sort of crazy hypervigilant. It's just that I live a life that's different now, with honesty at forefront as a spiritual principle. I'll talk about spirit because it is a spiritual journey being a human. There's a spirit, and we're here as in the spirit of this podcast. We're in the spirit, it doesn't have to be I'm spiritual. It's just the spirit of things, right? Spirit of honesty. This is where we start to get things moving. And sober is like one of those words. They talk about sobriety, but there's a great acronym, SOBER, SOBER, son of a bitch, everything's real, because we love fantasy, right? Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. But
son of a bitch, everything's real.
Yep.
And the thing is, we start to get honest about a situation, and things start to open up for us in miraculous ways. And that's been my experience. And so that roundabout moment, we all know that, when I hadn't communicated with this person for 6 months, but the funny thing is the way we communicate as humans, I don't know whether you've got a friend that you haven't talked to for 10 years and all of a sudden you meet up with them again, you go back to the same.
Straight back into it. Yeah.
Same thing. So this is the nature.
That was the relationship.
Unless you have the tools on board and the understanding of who you are right there in that moment and where you're going with the conversation and the awareness to be able to sort of come back to yourself, not get lost in that, which is not quite you anymore. Right?
It was a roundabout, but it was literally a crossroads of your life because you got the number off him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it went. And then if I didn't have the tools of communicating, particularly I started being a daily meditator, meditation had come into my life and all the tools of recovery were on board. I had connections in recovery, and that's what we have to have because we can't do this on our own. Been trying to hide behind these masks and control it on my own for too long. Had to strip it all out. That starts to happen slowly and nothing's fast here. But we've only got this moment, and after I made that communication, I could see, holy moly, I'm driving out of this intersection, this roundabout, going the other way, and got his number in my phone, and something said just delete, and I just deleted it. It was one of those old Nokia phones, right? And then, once I'd done it, something actually said, you can delete it. I deleted it. I had a choice prior to coming to recovery and that 6 months of being in recovery, I wouldn't have had a choice. There was no gap between how I was thinking and acting.
Thoughts.
Yeah. So it was really clear that the meditation, why I was meditating was because one of the older cleaner members in NA had said, look, you can start, if you stick to your meditation, which I started inside rehab, if you stick with it, you'll start to notice a gap between your first thought and action. And the addict is pronounced by there's not one gap. There's just a first thought, and usually the first thought's wrong, and you're going to get taken by that thought.
So it's giving that space. So you got time.
You got transformation space. You've got this little gap that starts to form. It can be quite wide and quite free. It's just freedom. It's freedom. Literally, you get these big ideas about freedom. That's freedom. We now have a gap that we can start to transform our life in, and that's what needs to happen. We need to be open to change, which is happening at all times anyway. And if you've been structured in your addict, there's no chance that you addict takes full hold, you end up in a little square box and any little bit of change from that is disruptive. So you have to use more or be very creative in trying to find more.
Yeah.
So existence becomes very, very narrow and very thin and very small. So with that gap, we start to sort of transform and actually allow our lives to expand again.
That's and how long has it been since you've been clean?
2006, December 18.
Okay, you seem at peace with yourself. Like sitting here, you seem like it might be still lurking, but you seem at peace with yourself.
Well, as long as I'm here, it's going to be here.
Yeah.
It's just
you acknowledge it.
Fully acknowledge and accept that's a part of me that can come alive at any time if I'm not watching. If I'm not, like I said, it's not something I have to be vigilant like crazy and oh my God, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's not like that anymore. Maybe in those early days. And you're
still getting enough from life. Like you're not chasing. Well, when I say you're not chasing, what is it? Storm Riders. You and Ross Clark Jones. You lunatic.
Well, that's a part of me,
That you've got to feed. You've got to feed that, but. if you don't feed that, you could fall back into something else. For those that don't know what we're talking about, Tom and his mate Ross Clark Jones, there's a movie, Storm Riders, isn't it? And Storm Surfers, and chasing big waves in very scary places.
Yeah, we did that for a while, and like again, that's not like a big part of my life now. Yeah. It's not like a major thing for me I used to chase it. And now it's not something that I chase. It's just, I'm offering myself to, that's what a lot of the tools of recovery are. It's all about evolving and allowing evolution to take place rather than sort of trying to hold on to, this is my image of myself that I'm going to be a big wave rider for the rest of my life and I've got to be catching, or I want the feeling of putting myself on the edge. I don't have those driving forces anymore. I no longer have that drive to compensate for the addict in any way. It's not there. That's not there.
And you've mentioned meditation. I know that's something you're very much into. And talk us through that. What you get and the type of experiences you get from your meditation and your yoga practices.
Oh yeah, so since coming into recovery and experiencing the direct results of coming to practice on a daily basis, and seeing the just feeling and experiencing the transformation that can happen as a result of doing something that didn't make sense to me, like sitting and doing nothing and closing my eyes. Like, it didn't make sense. I'm going, how am I going to do this? I couldn't sit still, let alone like for a minute, let alone sort of sit and, do these practices that bring my whole system down to its most least. I was all about being above the line and most excited human being I could be. But this practice actually sort of sitting to meditate, and I started my journey inside. I'd done some breath work and yoga, very intense yoga practices back in the late 80s and early 90s, and had some pranayama work in there with the breath, and some short meditation, but nothing like this where this is a tool. I'm going to put it in my life. This is all going to be part of my sort of, my recovery into being the Tom that's here now, not this fantasy about this or that, and this is what I want you to think that I am, and all this sort of complicated stuff. Sort of drop that into and allow that stuff to dissolve away through regular practice, and then just to go to my own true self, that's what the practice is. It's really sort of sitting within ourselves and getting to see how crazy our thoughts are, which can be absurd.
I like the breakdown of it, saying that you put a space between it. I also like, I think you use the word as a tool. Like I've been, and I was fortunate. I didn't realise why. I was drawn to meditation 30 years ago. Great. And it was sort of doing qigong, and I just sort of stumbled into it, and I was driven to it, and I went very deep into it, and I was getting a lot from it. It just sort of, you've got all this pent up aggression or whatever. It just sort of calms you, balances you, or whatever. I did get to a point, however, where I was thinking I've got to do 20 minutes meditation a day, and I was getting frustrated when I wasn't doing it. So I had to check myself in that, okay, I've gone for a run, I've done this, I forgot my meditation. I realised I was chasing the wrong thing. But I've retained that, and then I've gone through stuff in life as we all do, and the times that I need it, it's in that toolbox, and I can just bring it out and just slow myself down. When you're walking down the street and everyone's annoying you, I've got enough sense to realise it's probably not everyone, it's probably me. I'm in a shit mood. And then I can go take myself away and do a bit of meditation, and it does balance it out. So it's not this hippie dip shit that a lot of people think it is. There's definite benefits from it, and you're one of the most physical occupations you could possibly do. Big wave rider, professional surfer, and that, and you can find peace in doing it. It's interesting.
Well, it's all about connection. It's about connecting ourselves both within and outside. So we'll have a sense of kind of like surfing, I could say, is part of the meditation.
Yeah.
In traditional yogic traditions, they talk about it's like walking around with lycra on and lattes and with mirrors and doing sort of twisting the body and all that sort of stuff and beautiful music. It's three general practices of asana, which is the body movement. It's breath work, which is pranayama, and then there's meditation, which stills the system. So there's three things there at play. And yoga means the union of us with the cosmos. It's like connecting. So you feel connected. So if you're walking in the bush and you're walking along and you're smelling and you're connected to your senses and you're feeling kind of nice, you're getting the subtle sort of feeling of more relaxation in the body, even though you're doing some sort of exercise. You could call that a meditation. You could call, like some people say, when I'm playing golf, I feel like that's my meditation. Or I'm swimming laps, in the pool. You can get a certain meditative effect through the breath and the body movement.
Same with jogging. Like people often
jogging.
think,
But the one great thing about a regular sitting practice is that we don't any longer need to have a pool, a track, or a bush track, or a surfboard in the ocean, and everything to be just right for me to have that experience. When we regularly come to the practice, this is what I've found over the time, and we look to keep enriching that practice through your own natural inquiry, just allowing that to play out naturally. Then and then coming to it on a regular basis, because the sun comes up each day.
True.
And we want to go to the toilet and make sure that's regular too. You know what happens when that happens. But really, mind, it all starts in the mind. Everything starts with a thought. This microphone, this set of glasses, this key, this cup, this room, everything starts with a thought. So number one is our mental capacity to be here with ourselves. Number one. So let's not take that lightly, but also hold it lightly. So I don't want to get all serious and woo-woo and all that sort of stuff and the hippie thing.
Forget the listeners, Tom. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, so it's not, and I'm a spiritual thing, like, look, we're human beings, number one. And we have to give it recognition that we're a human being. And one thing is what I've noticed, and for me too, I get caught in the doing. I like doing stuff.
Yeah.
But if we have a regular practice of coming to ourselves, particularly in the morning after sleep, you wake up and you go, why would I want to meditate? But this is the great time to catch our pattern thinking, our pattern identification with thought, and actually break it before the day. So we give ourselves that chance. And we do it. When we do this regularly, we build experience.
Yeah.
Very important for us humans, isn't it? Experience, right?
A lot can be learnt from it.
That's it. If I wanted to learn how to be a cop, I'd want to have someone who's experienced as a cop to learn how to be a cop. I don't want to have some person who's just gone to school and they've got all the theory, and they've got
the experience counts a lot.
Experience.
Yeah.
I want to hear the experience.
Yeah.
So we get experience of ourselves in that space with ourselves, and see ourselves for who we really are at the deepest level, which is still quiet, and in fact beyond thought. And this place is pure inner contentedness. That's what it is. That's what we are at the baseline.
Yeah.
And it's all this other stuff that takes over, that takes us for a ride. So when we get to see that for what it really is, then we can start to notice that gap of transformation throughout the day. We take that out. It's not what happens in the meditation, it's what happens out of the meditation. Yeah. So get what I mean there? So we can have a craziest meditation. Oh, I'm just thinking this and thinking that. And sometimes get something, write it out after the meditation.
Yeah.
But very important, make it regular. If you can make it regular, this is where all the good stuff starts to happen. It's nice to hack yourself from time to time. Like you said, in the day where you had a bit of a stress and you notice something about yourself,
Pull
and
it back.
Great awareness that you have. Great. Brilliant.
It seems so simple when it's explained, and probably the simplest way I can describe it if I'm meditating, because people ask, what am I doing? And you could be I can be meditating in a busy area with noise in the background. You just let everything flow through. I say, picture a river and you something drifting down the river. Don't hold on to it, let it drift, and just clear your mind that way.
Beautiful.
But do you think that everything you've been through, like what you're talking now, it's all life experience, and that's brought you to the place you are now?
For sure. And it's funny, like Eckhart Tolle, the great spiritual teacher, like he wrote the book Power of Now. He talks about, like, your worst possible time becomes your greatest asset. So, and vice versa, your greatest success becomes your greatest failure. And it moves like this. It's been very clear in my life, this. So what looks like at the worst possible time, this happens. And then all of a sudden, this amazing gift that's been wrapped in shit's just been handed to you, and you can't see it just yet.
You don't see it. I went through traumatic times on different scales of things, but when I left the policing controversial circumstances, I was going, "What? That you've just taken my life away." And now I'm sitting here doing this, enjoying this, and I'm thinking I'm enjoying it more than I would be if I was still a cop. But if you told me that 3 years ago, I would have laughed at you or throttled you. It just wasn't in the thinking. What I think the message, and we'll get to wrap it up, but what I think the message that comes across here, Tom, and a fascinating life, like that goes without saying. And I'll look for my poster that I had on my bedroom wall and I'll pull it back up.
Yeah, fantastic.
But the fact that drugs, because this is, we talk crime, and I've seen so many people come across in front of me when I was a cop and since then, and how drugs can impact on life. And here we are talking successful, 2 times world surfing champion. Yeah, everyone just goes, wow, what drives that person? Drugs have grabbed hold of you. But I think there's probably, and I hadn't realised this until talking to you here, probably a more important lesson coming out, that those people that think there is no way out, there is a way out, and you're a walking example of that.
Yeah, so, and that's a beautiful message. It's not over until the fat lady sings. Yeah. And reach out. If there's anything going on that you want to kind of keep secret, let it out of the bag, free it up and put it out there in the universe.
The truth will set you free.
The truth does set us free.
Yeah.
Well, then you can stand in yourself and go, well, here I am. It's funny how guilt and shame has residue in the system, and you may even sort of sense it and feel it and tries to take over the proceeding. It takes time to undo this stuff out of the system. The body has a memory of it, so it tends to hold on to memory, cling on. So to allow things to free up completely, give yourself time. It's and it's, for those who are really caught in the situation they're in, they feel trapped. The bars are there only as long as you're unwilling to come forward with that which you're holding on to.
Yeah.
And so allow yourself to come forward, talk to someone, make contact, human contact. Like sometimes against all our just not one bone in my body that wants to do this, but let it free and move it on. This is, and gosh knows, go to the unknown. The unknown's where it's all at.
Yeah. Your life now, Tom, it's you're still doing some interesting stuff, but one of the things that you're doing, you got a business where you've combined 2 of your loves, the meditation and surfing together. What's that all about?
Well, I do teach meditation. I never thought I'd be a meditation teacher.
I bet you the guys at Newport Plus didn't think you would have been.
Yeah, well, they're all
30 years ago.
still a bit of disbelief, and but that's fine. And it's fantastic watching people, go into transformation in a really nice way. And sometimes it looks a bit funny, but for them, but they find out down the track as the transformation becomes much, much clearer for them. At first, it's the meditation is beautiful in any case, but I've been able to come together with my partner Mary Graham, who's my life partner at the moment. She teaches the asana work, and I teach the meditation and breath, and also give surf coaching. I bring in my daughter, Jenna Carroll. She does a couple of different modalities, human design, which is sort of beautiful reading on human design, and brings in naturopathy along top of that. And then I have another person, Takeshi's a Japanese Australian who does a Zen Shiatsu style of work, which starts to help the body sort of move things along and process. Just beautiful work. So we do that, and we pull that into a retreat setting and give the coaching. So it's at the moment it's a 3-day, 4 nights. So
where the people find you?
You can come into my website, tomcarrollmeditation.com. You can make an inquiry there. I also do retreats with Rodrigo Perez from Holistic Pro Health, which we call Art of Longevity. It's delivering information, practices, and so on, both in workshop form and 3-hour workshops, and we're doing a retreat this time, the first international one over in Sumba in Indonesia in April, the last 10 days of April.
Wow.
Coming up. But we're going to grow the retreats I'm doing also with my partner Mary, and that'll be more local in Australia locations.
I can tell just the way you're describing it, it's nourishing you, and that it's something that you've found what you're looking for. It's good.
And so good to see people kind of walk. Well, they don't want to leave. I know that. That's been pretty cool. That's that effect of, we don't want to go. And so everyone's standing around and we don't really want to go.
Okay, well,
it's kind of cool.
You're getting something across. But, look, full credit for you coming on the show. I'm really impressed, and I know I declared up front I've been a fan of your career and followed your career and been fascinated by it. You're an absolute lunatic in some regards. But thank you for being so open with us, talking about your demons and what caused them and how you got through them. I think it's an important message. So good luck to you in the future.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Cheers.
My pleasure, yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
We gotcha.